The love of my life decided to do something against me. She set me up with her best friend just to see if I would cheat. But I had no idea that exact moment her plan was so much deeper than that. And guys, I have a story to tell you. I did not plan on getting married to my wife when I did. This does not mean that I didn't love her. I doubt I'll ever love another woman the way I loved Patrice. Patrice and I go way back. We were lovers, and she was like a friend to me because I was a shy child and had no friends except for her. Beatrice was still in high school when she would sneak out of the house to meet me under the cover of the night. Our love was what silly folks would call true love that is made to last. But that's just nonsense. There's no such thing as true love. The whole thing is only interesting until it isn't anymore. That is, until other things or people began coming into the picture. Beatrice was the third child of her parents and the last. Her sisters were much older than her. Though her parents loved and appreciated her, they would usually say that she was not planned for. Beatrice had come into picture as a show of passion, and her parents, who were part of the pro-life movement, refused to get rid of her. Beatrice and I kept up the whole hide-and-seek love thing until she finally became pregnant in her final year of college. The news killed the excitement of our relationship, though, as I was sure I loved her. I wasn't sure I was ready to get married or become a father. I felt somewhat guilty because I'd put her in such a difficult spot. What was I to tell her parents? Her pregnancy was only 2 weeks old, and so to save her from the shame that would come from her parents and those around her, I proposed to her. Her parents were not against marriage, but they tried to convince Beatrice to get a job before getting married so she would not have to depend on me for anything. Beatrice remained adamant that she was ready to get married. Besides, she was going to graduate from college in about 2 weeks' time. Her parents finally gave the consent, and we rushed the whole thing. We had a short and simple wedding ceremony. Beatrice moved in with me right away after the wedding, and she graduated a few weeks later. I already had a job in an IT firm as the personal assistant to my boss, Mr. Daniels, while Beatrice stayed at home to nurse her pregnancy. I loved my wife, but the pregnancy sort of ruined the whole fun between us. I guess you don't feel as ecstatic about someone when you wake up beside them every day. Beatrice lost the pregnancy when it was 3 months, though, and she decided to take a 6-month course in event management to take her mind off of things. Upon finishing the program, Beatrice decided to start her event management brand, but it was not easy starting up as an individual in a city well-known firms that offered the same service around. A window of opportunity opened up for us when my company was planning our end-of-year party. We usually contact a popular firm to help set up the whole thing, but this time around, I tried convincing my boss to let my wife manage it. My boss did not immediately accept my proposal. There'd be dignitaries coming to grace the occasion, and he felt it was something an individual could handle on her own, much less someone who had not dealt with something of that magnitude before. It took a while before I finally convinced my boss to give my wife a chance. And the only reason he did was so that my wife was willing to charge half of the amount which the contracted company was charging. My wife did her best to exceed my boss's high expectations. Everyone noticed how seamlessly the party went, and my boss was pleased. He called me into his office the next day to inform me that his younger brother was getting married. Although he'd contacted the company that handled our event planning in the past, he was willing to call it off with them if my wife was willing to take the job. He also promised to assist her in any way she needed. I couldn't wait to finish work so I could tell my wife the news. When I got home, I found my wife and her friend, Tina, chatting. They were rejoicing at my wife's latest win, the end-of-the-year party she planned. The excitement increased when I told them about my boss's proposal. Beatrice and Tina were absolutely ecstatic. My wife accompanied me to the office the next day to accept my boss's offer. He reiterated his willingness to help her in any way she needed. This was the first of many meetings between my wife and my boss. He introduced her to his brother, and my wife began the planning process. This was her second gig, and she gave it her all. She overworked herself, staying out late, and, well, the wedding was a blast. It presented my wife with her second gig and so many other opportunities. She started getting gigs here and gigs there and was even earning more money than me. I was happy for Beatrice, because her success was my success, but something about her was now throwing me off. She began dressing differently, wearing clothes that were revealing. I tried to ignore it, but it was too hard to not notice. One evening, I almost fell out with my wife when she came home late. My boss had asked me to take the afternoon off as he was not feeling well and would be going home. When I got home, I discovered that Beatrice was not there. I wasn't aware of any current gig she was handling, so I assumed she must just be at Tina's place. I called my wife's mobile phone when it was past 7 and she was still not home. Beatrice was not answering the phone. So I called Tina's place to speak with her, and Tina said my wife had been there but had left a few minutes before I called. I felt relieved when Tina told me she was on her way. Well, it took about 45 minutes before Beatrice finally came home, and she reeked of alcohol. I knew she had never liked alcohol since I've known her, but she now reeked of it. As any curious and caring husband would be, I asked when she started drinking. Her response, well, it was impolite, and it dawned on me that she was a bit tipsy. I decided it was best just to discuss in the morning when she was in her right mindset. Beatrice went to bed that night in the same clothing. When Beatrice woke up the next morning, I offered her a cup of coffee. Her head was throbbing, and it was feeling like she wasn't used to it. I asked her about last night. She maintained the same story about hanging with her friend Tina for some girl time, and I did not doubt her tale. I only questioned the fact that besides starting to drink alcohol, she was also dressing in these revealing manners that wasn't appropriate for a married woman. What was supposed to be normal discussions between a husband and his wife, well, turned into something else. Beatrice took offense and claimed I was calling her, well, a loose woman who was cheating. I apologized just to avoid a quarrel, but Beatrice was not going to let the matter go. She starts packing her things, and when I asked what her plan was, she said she needs some alone time. I knew she was probably angry about what I've said, though I did not sound offensive in any way, and I tried pacifying her, but Beatrice insisted that I was all up in her space and she needs to breathe. Her plan of breathing was to go and stay with one of her older sisters, who lived outside the city for a few days. Beatrice's move was not okay by me, as I knew she had suddenly decided out of anger. But there was nothing I could do. I only hoped she would get over it quickly and come back. I felt miserable and lonely the first few days when my wife was gone. It was more like I'd reverted to the life of a bachelor. It reflected in my surrounding. I mean, my whole house was upside down. I'm not a dirty person, but the absence of my wife was just taking a toll on me. I don't know how, but her friend Tina suddenly began coming around to help me out at chores at home. She seemed sorry for the issues Beatrice and I were having, and her presence was needed at the time and appreciated until her, quote, help began taking a different direction. Tina had repeatedly suggested that we went out to grab a bit of a bite or watch a movie so the impact of my wife leaving me would be felt less. Well, I steadily declined as I didn't find it okay to do. I was supposed to be looking for means to get my wife home and not do things to forget her. I got home very tired one evening just to discover that Tina had done my laundry as usual and prepared dinner. Well, I'll be honest with ya, dinner was great. But Tina refused to leave. I was about to get a bath before Tina got into my room, well, dressed pretty casual. I was disappointed at the fact that she was willing to throw away her friendship with my wife simply because she wanted me. I'm no kid. I knew she wanted us to have, well, sex, but I was not in the least bit interested. I told her of my disinterest, but she persisted. We were going back and forth with me rejecting the advances when she kissed me. I pulled her apart, only to find my wife staring at the both of us with rage. The emotions in the room were tense as my wife accused me of cheating on her with Tina. Even though I knew she was wrong, I could understand why she would think that. After all, who would not be upset to find their spouse kissing another woman who was so dressed like this? Tina, who had caused this mess, quickly left the room in shame, leaving my wife to vent her anger on me. I watched as Beatrice turned away from me and made her way towards the door. Tears streaming down her face. This was not a good sign. My wife had already abandoned me for almost 2 weeks, and now she was leaving me again, less than 10 minutes after resurfacing. The worst part was she might be leaving me for good this time, and I can't blame her. I felt hopeless as I watched her leave. I've done everything I could to prove my innocence, but it seemed like it was just not enough. My mind raced with thoughts of what I could have done differently. Maybe I should have been more careful with how I interacted with Tina. Maybe I should have been more aware of how my actions could be perceived by my wife. But the truth was that there was nothing I could do to change the past. All I could do was hope that my wife would eventually come to see that I was telling the truth. In the meantime, I would have to live with the consequences of my actions and the pain that came with them. As I sat alone in my room, I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever be the same between my wife and me again. It was clear that trust had been broken, and it would take a lot of work to repair it. But I was willing to do whatever it took to make things right, even if it meant starting from scratch. I determined that I was going to fight to save my marriage no matter what. For the past few days, I've been trying to reach my wife, but no avail. Despite many efforts, I don't know where she is or how to contact her. I tried calling her sister, who also lives in the city, but I don't have their addresses. Even if I did, I doubt I would find her there, as she would likely be avoiding me due to our current situation. The only option left was to check her parents' place. However, upon arriving, I learned that Beatrice was not there, and her parents had not heard from her in a while. I explained the dire situation to them, telling them that their daughter caught me kissing her best friend. They did not draw any conclusions and promised to contact me if they heard from her. It has now been 3 days since I visited my in-laws, and, well, I've yet to hear any news from them. As I sit at work, my thoughts are consumed by my wife and the possibility that she wants nothing to do with me at the moment. The uncertainty and lack of communication are weighing so heavy on me at this time. I'm left wondering what went wrong in our relationship and how can I fix it. I love my wife deeply and regret my actions, letting her best friend get so close to me. But I'm not sure if she can forgive me. I know that I need to give her space and time to process everything, but it's difficult, not knowing where she is or how she's doing. I'm currently at work, but the current situation with my wife has left me feeling lost and uncertain. I hope that she'll come back to me soon, so we can work through our issues together. It's been 2 weeks since I last saw or heard from my wife, and things have gone really bad. I closed work earlier today because of an unexpected event. We were all at work when my boss's wife showed up to embarrass her husband in the presence of his staff. She accused him of cheating on her. Though he was vehemently denying it, she was a seasoned lawyer who had been away for 3 days and had returned home to find a lady's underwear in her room. Underwear that did not belong to her. She knew it was that of her husband's mistress. The shocking part of the whole thing was that she had the underwear in her hands. This was not the first time that they would be having an issue like this, but it was the first time my boss's wife would be shaming him in the presence of his employees. It was no news to us, though. We all knew our boss very well. He loved women. I, above every other person, knew that for a fact since I am his assistant. I arrange his itinerary. I can boast that I know all the lovers he keeps outside of his home. I'm his PA after all. The embarrassment from his wife was getting too much on my boss, who still maintained his ground that he was in fact innocent. So I tried intervening. My idea was to get them both out of the office so they could deal with the issue privately, but his wife suddenly poured a good part of her anger on me. My boss's wife accused me of being an accomplice to her husband's cheating lifestyle by covering it up and warned me to stay out of their matters. My boss had to leave the office in a bid to save face, and to be honest, I didn't bother following him as his wife had already done that. The issue between my boss and his wife reminded me that I still had unresolved issues with my wife, though my case was a bit different in a sense. I'm an innocent man of my wife's accusations. But I cannot say the same for my boss, whom I knew so well to be a chronic lover of any good thing in a skirt. Even though he claimed innocence this time around, the more I thought about it, the more I discovered that my boss could be guilty this time. With recent weeks, he had reduced the way he moved around with me. He would sometimes go out for lunch and would not let me know where he was going. The interesting thing about the lunch that he went to have was that he spent hours and most times would call the office to inform us that he had closed up for the day. It somewhat makes sense to believe he's cheating on his wife, so I got back from the office today after my boss had left early, and I found an envelope lying in front of my door. I tore it open to discover that I've just been served divorce papers from my wife, Beatrice. I'm still at a loss for what to do, and I'm not ready to lose my wife. I wish I could just sit here and just talk with her, but she's nowhere to be found. Update number 2. Guys, something's seriously off. After receiving the divorce papers from the court, I boiled with anger. Anger towards myself and the cause of my problems, Tina. The more I saw the paper lying in front of me, the angrier I became. I suddenly stood up and headed for Tina's place. Honestly speaking, I did not know my reason for going to her place, and neither did I know that what would happen if I got there. I guess you could say I was just driven by anger. I got to Tina's place with the divorce papers in my hand and began banging on the door. I was willing to break it down if she didn't want to open it. The door finally opened, and I was shocked to find someone I least expected standing right there in front of me. My wife, Beatrice. It made no sense that my wife, Beatrice, was at the house of the friend whom she'd seen kissing me. She was equally shocked to see me and attempted to shut the door in my face, but I didn't let it go. I got into the apartment to find her friend, Tina, comfortably seating on the couch. A bottle of red wine was open, and there were 2 glasses on the table. From the picture I was seeing, these 2 people who were supposed to be fighting each other were chillin'. It made no sense that my wife, who had abandoned me for days after accusing me of cheating on her with her best friend, would suddenly be seen sharing a bottle of wine with that said best friend. Well, I suspected she's been staying there for days because she was not fully dressed and her hair was undone. I'd come there angry at Tina for breaking my home, but seeing my wife, who I have not seen in a while, I didn't bother analyzing issues there. My mind was focused on making peace. I began pleading with Beatrice to come home so we could work things out. Well, Beatrice refused. She said she was done with the marriage, and Tina did not give us time to speak. She ordered me out of her house, and I had to leave when she attempted to call the cops on me to come throw me out. I did not take a cab home. I walked all the way. It gave me time to finally ask questions that I should have asked my wife and her friend. Why was my wife with her friend whom she had accused me of sleeping? If she had made up with her friend, then why was she not willing to make up with me? Different illogical thoughts raced through my mind. I even had thoughts that my wife could be, well, a lesbian. I finally decided to put tabs on them. So I recently hired a private investigator to keep tabs on both my wife Beatrice and her friend Tina. Update number 3. So, My private investigator recently called me to dispel the fears I've been having of my wife being a lesbian. However, he had something shocking to tell me. My investigator showed me pictures of my wife Beatrice and her friend meeting up with Mr. Daniels. I initially assumed it meant nothing, as I thought he was probably settling with her up with some event managing contracts. So, my heart skipped a beat when he went further to show me pictures of my wife engaging in public display of affection with my boss at an eatery. This was the height. I knew my boss was a womanizer, but I never expected him to be sleeping with my wife, to whom I'm still married. Beatrice and I were yet to get a divorce, so it meant that the relationship had been going on for a while. My boss had taken advantage of everything all along, and how dirty could a man be to sleep with his PA's wife? He could not even wait for my wife to get divorced before starting up relationships with her, huh? Yeah, if you called my boss a hypocrite, then you would be wrong, because he was worse than that. He continued working with me as though nothing was happening. He'd filed a divorce against his wife where he stated that she's grown erratic, impossible to live with simply because she accused him of cheating on her. An accusation that finally turned out to be true. A painful part of the whole thing is the fact that his beautiful wife, who gave him a male child of 2 years, had been enduring his cheating spree all along, and never subscribed to the divorce. I didn't know how to react. A part of me just felt like showing up at my boss's place and giving him the beating he deserved. Well, I finally decided to act calmly. I met up with his wife and told her that she's been right all along with the accusations that she's levied against her husband. His wife broke down and starts crying at this point, and she began telling me episodes of how she had caught her husband flirting with ladies in the past. And I felt guilty because I sometimes arrange these things for him. Well, you can say I got served what I deserved. The cheating and filing for divorce things were clear to her. She was a lawyer, and so she knew the implications. She informed me that her husband would divorce her and not part with his property while he stood the chance of gaining custody of their only son. As for me, on the other hand, she informed me that my wife, Beatrice, would be awarded alimony since she had caught me cheating. She even suggested that Tina and my wife might have set me up, as it was the only logical explanation for finding them sharing a bottle of wine and friends who had kissed her husband. So, she advised that I use the evidence which I had gotten to escape the alimony, which we knew that the court would award my wife, as she was going to use them to make her husband pay. Update number 4. Well, the divorce between my wife and I will be finalized in a week, and I've what it takes to escape paying alimony, but there has been an interesting twist to the whole thing. My private investigator recently called my attention to the fact that Tina was sleeping with Mr. Daniels too. Yeah, you heard that right. Tina was trying to snatch my wife's rich lover who is my boss. I informed my boss's wife about the recent developments, and she suggested we just watch from a distance until we can use it to our advantage. We anonymously forwarded a few images of Tina and my boss to Beatrice, and oh my gosh, she lost her temper. She could not stand being done what was done to her. That hypocrite. Beatrice could not come to the office to confront my boss, as she did not want to give herself up as a cheating little girl. But she was not the one to keep her anger in check. She immediately went straight to the 2-bedroom apartment where my boss was currently living at to wait for him. He'd moved out of his house since he filed for divorce from his wife. Beatrice had the key to his apartment as she was preparing for life as the soon-to-be Miss Daniels. Well, my investigator was trailing her all along. Beatrice got to the house to find my boss and her friend Tina in bed. She got into a fight with her friend, and at this point they began trading words. The moment she called her friend a shameless person, her friend blew up. She noted my wife had not right to accuse her of attempting to steal her man when she was doing far worse. It was the heat of the moment kind of thing that Tina began to talk about how my wife had set me up with her, simply because she wanted to divorce me and get awarded alimony while still having her family on her side. Mr. Daniels, who was not willing to be caught in the whole thing, left the scene while both ladies were fighting. I don't know how they later settled their differences, but one thing I'm certain of is that Mr. Daniels will not stay with either of them for as long as he'd stayed with his wife. The moment he sees a lady who arouses him more, he's going to dump them even without thinking twice. My wife and I will be headed to court in a few days. There's enough evidence to nail the both of them. The love that I once had for my wife has turned to disgust. Update number 5. Final update. Hey guys, it's been 3 months since my last update, and this is because I'm currently in a relationship with my former boss's wife. A relationship that I'm enjoying to the fullest. I'm sure you're curious to know how I got into a relationship with Mr. Daniels' wife, so I'll gladly satisfy your curiosity. The day before my wife and I went to court, I visit my boss to hand in my resignation letter. He asked me why I was resigning, and I simply told him that I found a better job. The day of the divorce hearing finally arrived, and Beatrice's parents were in court. She had informed them about the divorce and claims that I've cheated on her with her best friend. They came to support their daughter, and I was glad because it allowed me to reveal to them who their daughter actually had become. I presented my evidence to the court, but my wife attempted to deny the whole thing until I suggested that her friend Tina be summoned as a witness in the trial. Beatrice knew the case was lost the moment I brought up the suggestion because she and Tina were no longer on speaking terms. And Tina would waste no time standing against her in court. She admitted to staging the whole cheating thing with her friend Tina, so she could divorce me while gaining sympathy from her parents and getting alimony too. The judge ruled in my favor and the case was dismissed, but that was not all. She was ordered to cover the cost of hiring a lawyer and all, and her parents were super disappointed in her, and they left the premises in shame. I'm sure she'll not be visiting them for a very long time. Mr. Daniels got the news about the divorce from my wife, and it was clear that his plan had been foiled. His hearing was just 3 days apart from mine, and he attempted to make peace with her. His wife had enough, though. She knew her husband was only asking for peace because he feared the repercussions. His wife was bent on making him pay. She used the confessions of my wife to point out the fact that her husband was a chronic cheater. Guys, she won the case. She was awarded custody of their little boy, and half of her husband's property was given to her. My former boss's wife and I began seeing each other from time to time. I would check up on her and the kid just to see how they were doing, and that was how we became so close. Recently, my former boss's wife's son and I had dinner at a famous restaurant, and we crossed paths with my former boss. He had a lady by his side, and it was not Beatrice. Neither was it Tina. I could see the look of jealousy on his face when he saw that I had taken his wife. And well, his kid too, just as he's taken mine. I'm just glad at the end of this story, OP's ex-wife was exposed in court in front of her parents, and everything she planned went down the drain. Guys, I would love to hear from y'all. What would you do if you were in OP's very unique situation in this story, and you find out not only did you get set up, not only did you get betrayed, but also your boss of your career was part of the whole thing? Drop your comments down below, guys. Thank you for joining me on today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next one.